Hey there, my name is Adam Winrich and this is a video about Terry Jacka Bullwhips. This is the most different models of Terry's whip that I've ever had in my collection. I thought it'd be fun to make a video about it and go through all the different models and then talk a little bit about what makes Terry's whips unique. If you haven't heard about Terry Jacka, he's an Australian whip maker and he's been making whips for a long time. He's currently retired, but his whips have famously been in some movies such as Batman Returns, as the whip being used by Catwoman, Michelle Pfeiffer in that movie. His whips were also in The Rundown and Underworld, and also famously in the fourth Indiana Jones movie. And his whips have also gotten a reputation because they were used by the Hollywood stuntman Anthony DeLongis. So now I'm going to move the camera and give you a close-up look at these different models of whips. The first set of bullwhips I'm going to show off in this video is a pair of 5-foot bullwhips made by Terry Jacka. So they're a 12-plat kangaroo. They go down to a 6-strand point and have a white hide fall. The original crackers are long gone on this set of whips, but I think this is the original falls. And pretty much what's cool about these whips is that well, they crack really good, and two, you don't see too many matched pairs of Terry Jacka bullwhips. And also they're 5 foot long, and that makes them really nice for two-handed whip cracking and a fast Queensland crossover. Moving up in length, this is a very good condition 6-foot 16-plat Target bullwhip. It was sold as a Target bullwhip through Western Stage Props. And some cool things about this whip. One, it has the original cracker. Terry had some interesting crackers he put on his whips where usually they were twisted for the first part with like about 4 strands of material, and then it's knotted off, and then there's only 2 strands of the material that continue the twist. And this one's worn a little bit. There would have been a couple other like wear knots down the length of the cracker. And also this is a slightly later production whip of Terry, so instead of ending in a 6-plat point, it ends in a 8-plat point. And you can see the handle's really long. That's hence the name Target whip. And it's a fiberglass handle, so it's got a lot of flex to it. Pretty good whip. This whip here was sold through Western Stage Props about the same time as the Target whip that I just showed you. And this was sold as the Outback model. It has a handle that's like about 12 some inches, a little bit over 12 inches. And it's 16 strands of kangaroo, 7 foot long. It also has the 8-plat point and the original cracker. You can see there's like one more wear knot there on the cracker than on the Target whip we just saw. So this was sold as the Outback whip, but I believe on Terry's website, when he started selling whips online, this was actually sold as a tapered handled bullwhip. So you can kind of see the handle tapers down to about this point and then sort of builds up again near the transition. So very nice whip, and I'll move the camera in to give you a closer look at the braiding. Again, moving up in length from 5-footers to 6-footers to 7-footers. Now we're up to an 8-footer. This is an 8-foot cat whip, is what it's called. So this particular design was created for the Halle Berry movie, Catwoman. And what differentiates this design from Terry's other whips is first you see there's no transition knot, there's no wrist loop, and also there's no diamond plaiting in the handles. So it's just a regular herringbone done in 12 strands all the way down the whip. And I guess the point was to make the whip seem more like a cat tail. So just like the previous 2 whips I showed you, this one still has the original cracker. Again, it was made about the same time as those other 2 whips I just showed you. And has an 8-plat point. And I don't know if you can tell, this is a pretty chunky whip, but it rolls out really nice. And here is the last whip I have to share with you. This is an 8-foot bullwhip made by Terry. This was made about the same time as the very first pair of whips I showed you. You can see this has a white hide fall on it instead of a latigo fall. It also ends in a 6-plat point. And this one here is a very classic example of Terry's work. So I'll take a minute to describe some things that makes Terry's whips unique. So first, I guess talking about the handle. Yeah, Terry usually always has a diamond platting in the handle, and with all the whips I showed you today, they all have a fiberglass foundation in the handle. And when I visited Terry, I saw one of his handle foundations. He would usually also put a little piece of steel cable going into the end of the fiberglass, sort of to help reinforce the transition. On some whips with steel cable in them, if the whip is small enough in diameter, you can use a magnet to kind of detect that the cable's in there. But Terry used a really thin piece of cable in his handle, so you can't really detect it with a magnet. You probably have to x-ray the whip. So Terry did switch to fiberglass. Most of his older, more classic looking bull whips, for some people really into Terry's work, his older whips had a cane foundation that was tapered, and that made the handles usually a little bulkier, a little bit bigger, and had more shape to them. And then the rest of the whip tapered down a little bit faster. So it's kind of as Terry got older and later in his career, he started making his whips a little bit heavier, and he started making the transitions a bit stiffer. So, but through all those years, some things that really stayed with Terry's style of whip making is that you'll notice as you go down the thong, probably right to about here, the width of the strand starts getting really fine. And the point was to have, or to increase the number of stitches or braids per inch. So the idea was that a whip would roll out finer and look more refined if there were more stitches per inch. You can see up here where the strands are wider, there are fewer stitches per inch, but then the strands taper down really fast to give more stitches per inch. And I would sort of think of it, I don't know, kind of I'll coil this up. If you think of a whip as like a coil of wire, or it's two sort of coils, or spirals, I would say. Half the strands spiral around one way, and half the strands spiral around the other way, sort of interlocking with each other. And you can imagine if you made a coil where everything kind of has, I would say, sort of an angle like this in a spiral, it won't flex as easily as if the spiral is tighter. So that's sort of the idea. So while Terry, with strands this width, you could have braided that 16 plat and cover that diameter, but that would have sort of made the angle, I would say, a little bit wider, I guess we'll call it. So that would mean, even though the strands were cut as fine, it wouldn't roll out as finely as doing it in 12 plat and having the strands the same width, and kind of gives a finer coil to the whip. And something else I'd mentioned with Terry's whips that's interesting is that the inside of the whip actually isn't kangaroo. Terry would use split chrome cowhide for all of the internals of his whip, and the idea is that it would hold more grease, so you get more density, and it would compress more than kangaroo leather. And then also something you'll see, the fall hitches are there's probably more of them, more hitches around the fall than you'd normally see in the end of a 6-plat whip, because what I've noticed is Terry would cut all his strands actually the full length to be braided. So it's not like he would cut some strands half the length he needed and then other strands a little bit longer than that. All 12 strands actually go the full length of the whip, and he drops them into the core. So even the strands that in the 12-plat section that are dropped in, they stay inside the whip. So there's actually, instead of cowhide in the end of the whip, that's all kangaroo where you need the most strength. So that's a couple things about Terry Jacka Bullwhips, and in particular this very classic example of an 8-foot Terry Jacka Bullwhip from somewhere around 2000 to 2005. I hope you enjoyed getting a look at all these different Terry Jacka Bullwhips, and if you're watching this video shortly after I posted it, I'll let you know that Mark Allen has bought a whole collection of Terry Jacka Bullwhips, and he has them up for sale. I'll put a link to his website in the description in case you'd like to buy a Terry Jacka Bullwhip for yourself. Well, my name is Adam Winrich. Thanks for watching.